All right, 2 Kings chapter 15. Let's call this one Did Not Depart From, doing too much and too little, because we're going to see both extremes at the beginning and the end of the chapter. And in between, we're going to see a focused discussion of the kings of Israel who were just consistently not departing from the ways of Jeroboam that led the entire nation astray. But at the beginning of the chapter, it's going to talk about a king, and I'm going to call it Uzziah because I'm more familiar with the story from 2 Chronicles, but he is going to be an exceptional king who, once again, like his father Amaziah, is going to be very successful to the point where it's going to tempt him to try to do too much. This time, the too much is not going to lead the entire nation into trouble, but personally, it's going to get him stricken with leprosy. And we're going to see in the Chronicles how the reason he was stricken with leprosy was because he began to expand his office, as quite possibly he had become so successful that just being king had become boring. And so as he began to try to take over the duties of a priest, he went too far to the point where God struck him with leprosy. But it's not going to be all bad because it's going to give his son Jotham an opportunity to step up and learn what it's like to be king a little bit early, because Uzziah is going to have to live in a separate residence, understanding that he is a leper and quite possibly highly contagious. Jotham is going to rule from the king's house and begin to take over many of the administrative duties of actually running Judah. However, as the end of the chapter picks up his story, it is going to show us how he might quite possibly overcompensate by simply not going into the temple at all, the place where his father was stricken with leprosy for trying to do too much. But in between these stories of one king extremely successful trying to do too much and another overcompensating even though he's extremely successful, still not living up to his God-given potential, those are bookends on a chapter that largely talks about the succession of the kings of Israel that, as you guessed it, are simply taking a consistent nosedive because, as we have discussed in weeks before, it seems that none of these kings resist the comfort of the status quo, understanding that they are each taking the baton from a leader who had the nation pointed in the wrong direction. They seem to be content with whatever they see around them as being just good enough, never really suffering enough to make the decision to embrace the necessary changes that might have saved the nation of Israel. So in this chapter, we are going to see the end of Jehu's line, his fourth generation, as God had promised, is going to end with his son, Zechariah. This Zechariah, not the same as the son of Jehoiada, priest in Judah, is actually going to be killed by a conspiracy formed by a man named Shallum, who is going to reign for only a little while before he himself is taken down by a conspiracy led by a man named Menachem. He is going to get to live out his days and pass the throne to his son Pekahiah, but Pekahiah is going to be killed in a conspiracy led by the next king, Pekah, who himself is going to be taken down by Hosea, the last in at least this chapter's chain of conspirator kings, bringing us near the end of a chain of toxic takeovers that are eventually going to end in chapter 17, where God is simply going to take most of Israel off into captivity. But there's still time for Judah, as we'll see in the next chapter. However, Jotham's tendency to overcompensate and completely stay away from the house of God, while it's not going to provide huge problems for his reign, it's potentially going to set an example for his son, Ahaz, the next king of Judah, who is not only going to seem to be estranged from the house of God, he's going to seem to have grown hostile toward the house of God. Essentially, he's going to look for guidance from Israel, a nation that's actually about to collapse.